Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian and Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts in the Libertarian and Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have, this is even more ridiculous than Biden telling people they ain't black if they vote for Trump. A white left claiming she controls a black man's identity is really saying she owns him and all of her people of African descent, from Alex Jones on Twitter, and that was him quote tweeting libs of TikTok, who shared a video of Chelsea Handler saying, "I had to remind him, 50 Cent, that he's a black person so he can't vote for Donald Trump." And my response was, awfuls, affluent white female liberals, they are the worst, and that's my thoughts on that issue. It's the Democrats feel like they're entitled to minority votes, and now I don't think you're entitled to any votes whatsoever. And just like I don't think you're entitled to really anything whatsoever, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have LBJ and progressive hypocrisy, or why narratives matter more than anything else when it comes to the perception of presidents. And I posted that when that was another self-post that I made. I said, cross-post is something I just posted in r/presidents, thought I would share here as well. If you were to describe LBJ as a person, he's pretty much everything that progressive redditors claim to hate. He was an old and racist southerner who first won election to the Senate in part due to fraud. I linked to the Wikipedia page for the box routine scandal about how he kind of rigged the 1948 Democratic primary for the Senate against Coke Stevenson by finding a box full of votes just that were pretty much all just for him. Then we have, and was well known for using physical intimidation, the infamous Johnson treatment, to get what he wanted. He also used politics more so as a means to an end than anything else. There's a reason a lot of people tend to quote him as saying, "I'll have those Enslers voting Democrat for 200 more years." Despite all this, most people on this website rank LBJ in their top 10. They don't seem to care about any of what I just described, and only seem to care that Johnson passed what they deemed to be the correct legislation, and that he had what they deemed to be the correct letter next to his name. It's proof that most people are completely willing to disregard a person's flaws if the narrative is in their favor, and I definitely think you see that a lot when it comes to both modern politics and the historical assessment of it. And that's my thought on that issue. So, yeah. I definitely think, I think, if you want to think that, legislation's all that matters, I think you should be able to. I think that's kind of ignoring the big picture, though. You just can't remove legislation from the context which it was passed in. History doesn't exist in a vacuum like that. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have U.S. Supreme Court justices disclose Bali hotel stay, Beyonce tickets, book deals from Reuters.com by Swampanky Dan. And yeah, I definitely agree. They're all corrupt. I think pretty much every politician in the U.S. justice system and the U.S. government is corrupt. And that's why and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, I don't think Trump will get a mistrial. It's NYC. They don't care about the Constitution for being libertarian on Twitter, and I posted that. And I said, most of the rest of the country is only better at hiding it, to be fair. None of the country really seems to care about the Constitution. New York City is just one of the places that hides it the least. And that was their response to, apparently one guy on Facebook said, "My cousin is juror and says Trump's getting convicted. Thank you for all your hard work." And yeah, that was before the results came out, so that's grounds for mistrial. But as he said, I don't think they're going to do a mistrial because Trump stands more to gain from being a convicted felon than he has to lose at this point, I would say. And that's true for, I think, both left-leaning people and right-leaning people. Left-leaning people want to say, "Oh, look how guilty he is," and the right-leaning people want to say, "Look how persecuted he is." So that's why I think, there won't be grounds for mistrial. They won't say it's mistrial. Then we have, it's fun to see the different things I got blamed for, but this one, from Jared Polis on Twitter, and he's the governor of Colorado, and that was him sharing a screenshot of a tweet from some furry named Jedediah H. Bartley. "My wife couldn't volunteer at Children's Hospital because her furry costume can't be disinfected. I am so raging mad about kids that won't be able to see a furry friend." Person who said that probably never understood the mental health of kids. Curse you, Jared Polis, and your ilk for causing all this fucking shit, considering that in her home state of Arizona mine, this would have been less of a problem. At Jared Wallace, here's hoping you burn in hell. And I said, it feels like people like this make up the majority of social media these days. I think if you want to be a furry, I think that's fine. Wear your fursuit wherever you want to. But that being said, a lot of people might find that freaky, and I personally would kind of find it freaky as well. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, she just had a baby. Soon she'll start 7th grade from Time.com by Baton Fortin. And they added, unable to navigate the Byzantine rules to get an abortion in Mississippi, a child is forced to give birth to another child. And, yeah, I personally don't think that's good. But, ultimately, I would say I would have gotten an abortion if I were her, but if she didn't want to get an abortion, I think she should, it's her decision. With that being said, ultimately, um, yeah, that's why I personally I'm more on the pro-choice side, but yeah, I definitely don't think you should be having a kid that young, but ultimately it should be up to individual choice, I think, and not that the choice of the state, and that's my fault on that issue. Then we have judge expunges convictions of couple who waved guns at protesters in St. Louis from thehill.com by Swan Pinky Dan, and I said, let's see, there it is. They didn't even shoot. It's the definition of a victimless crime. I wouldn't point a gun at people, but you just can't say, oh, he pointed a gun at me and I felt threatened. Ultimately, some people feel threatened for as long as you're not shot at. I don't think they should have been charged. I think it was a clear case of self defense as well, and they didn't need to shoot. So that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump's Guilty Verdict Matters from Salon.com by Donald Key. And I said, it matters as much as people want it to matter. The walls have supposedly been closing in on the guy for almost a decade now, and people will just move on to whatever the next scandal is. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have someone convicted of a felony should be allowed to become president, polling data from Lemon Limelight, and they said The Economist reporting on new polling data says the share of Republicans who told YouGov, a pollster, that a convicted felon should be allowed to serve as president rose from 17% to 58% between April and June. See chart. Well, what accounts for dramatic shift? A new compassion for justice and impact individuals, a criminal justice reform epiphany. Obviously not. It's a Trump conviction, and according to The Economist again, Republicans' capacity to rationalize behavior that until recently they had considered beyond the pale. And they also had YouGov has their own way up with the underlying date. And I said, 2015, he mocked a disabled reporter, it's over. 2016, he said, grab him by the pussy, it's over. 2017, he colluded with the Russians, it's over. 2020, he botched COVID, it's over. 2021, January 6th, it's over. We got him this time for sure. I linked to Freedom Team's video from 2019 about how Trump is finished, because, that's always seems to be the narrative. Eventually people will just move on to whatever the next era is regarding him. If he wins the election, they'll just find another thing to go after him for. And, yeah, even if he doesn't win the election, they'll probably still focus on him forever as long as he's the most prominent individual in the GOP. So I don't think it really matters too much. Ultimately, I think both sides, as I said earlier, really benefit from him being branded a convicted felon. The right because of how they can label him as being persecuted, and the left because they can label him as being guilty. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Now we have I feel left out. Hey, at Ukraine, no more money for you. Now put me on your list for Angelo Veltri on Twitter, and I posted that, and that was him quote tweeting Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania. Ukraine is published with in essence a hit piece full of people, politicians, organizations who are real national terror, national car, and the Libertarian Party who are against their funding corrupt government politicians to extend a war that is not also able to be one that has killed untold numbers of innocents. The USA should have never been provoked. Funders have replied this war. It's time for you to say cut ties with the corrupt regime and advocate for peace. And I said, I hope they put me on the next list as well, LOL. I think that's very much the libertarian goal, is to get on as many government enemy lists as possible. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, there's nothing he can do that would separate them from the cult. Nothing your leader does can be wrong. And that's from Clorox, and that's crossed from the cult headquarters subreddit. And that's about how Trump supporters defend fake Trump audio recording. And yeah, I definitely would kind of agree with that. People are really up there, who up their politicians' asses these days, it seems. Especially they'll vote for them as long as they have the correct letter next to their name. You see that a lot with the Democratic Party as well. That I'm sure if this was Hillary supporters, and they defend fake Hillary audio recordings as well, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have American Capitalists don't want you to know that the Nazis were capitalists too, from BeckerandMalloy.com, and that's from American MWAF, and that's across from the Fox Hides Info subreddit. And I like what HarryCut9721 says here. American oxygen breathers don't want you to know that Nazis breathed oxygen too, Ultimately, the Nazis slept, drank water, and ate food as well, but, no one's saying that, So I added, why is seemingly everyone on this website a Marxist? If it wasn't for COVID and nipple stuff, there's reason to I'd be Marxist today as well, I'd say. I did vote for Bernie in 2016 and 2020 primaries. With that being said, I know Thomas Wall and Mike Ruckenwald are libertarians, used to be Marxists as well. So ultimately, yeah, it just seems like anyone, they'll always find a way to say that capitalism is fascism, and any dissent at all is fascism, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Meta missing obvious rule from Free Bytes, and they said this subreddit appears to be missing an obvious rule. The topics of the post in this or subreddit should be in some way whatsoever related to libertarianism, and movement should be related to politics. I could post every day about the brilliant lyrics of Garth Brooks or about how I would like to show Westworld, but I would not be really so that we should have a rule for this. And I said, sounds like a push for more censorship. Who are you to say when something isn't related to libertarianism? And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have voting is how we prevent authoritarian private capitalist corporate governments from dominating society from American MWAF, and that's crosswords from the bumper sticker subreddit. Voting works better than pretending both sides are the same, otherwise you are also to blame. And I said, my response was, you're a Marxist but also vote blue no matter who. That seems to be most Redditors these days. And that's my thoughts on that issue. I think the more principled Marxists are probably going for one of the socialist parties or the Green Party, but no, the Reddit socialist is always going to vote blue no matter who. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have how Republicans flipped America's state Supreme Courts from USAtoday.com by Paton 13. They added state Supreme Courts were once dominated by Democrats. A concerted effort by right-wing groups has changed that with massive implications for abortion, LGBTQ plus rights, and elections. And of course, ultimately that's kind of the goal of government, is to flip as many seats as possible to your side. But, ultimately when the Republicans do that, apparently it's the worst thing ever. So that's my thoughts on that issue. And then we have Massey. I've Republicans say that what's wrong about what AIPAC is doing to you. Let me talk about my AIPAC person. What does that mean, an AIPAC person? Is that it's like I remember has this. IDK how it works on the Dem side. That's how it works for Republicans. And from Property Union, it says, I'm posting a jitter link to an interview by Tucker Carlson. Dear gods, what's happened to me? Seriously, though, I think we really need to be looking more closely just so the exceptional influence the Israeli government has over our elected officials, especially in the GOP. And I said, Tucker Carlson's definitely overhated. He's one of the only prominent GOP figures right now to openly say that Israel is committing war crimes. If the GOP were smart, they'd be running him instead of Trump. Also, they should probably be running Thomas Massey instead of Trump. There's a guy who actually has some principles, unlike Trump, who's just like, look at me, I'm the best. Then we have LP supports Chase as long as he doesn't take what he takes roofs from Biden. Dina be free. And they said from the latest Angela email, I will do everything in my part to ensure Chase has all the resources he needs to maintain our strong polling presence and to pull protest votes from the left in areas that will hurt Biden the most. And yes, she does really believe Trump is miserable about the LP. After reading our list of demands, Donald Trump committed to freeing Ross Ulbricht, abolishing the Department of Education, and putting the Libertarian in his cabinet. I fear these folks are living in a fantasy world at this point and know how to laugh or cry. And I couldn't respond because they blocked me. But with that being said, ultimately I think Donald Trump is going to go back on his word because, you can't take a politician at their word. With that being said, I definitely think, Chase is probably going to pull more votes away from Trump than from Biden at this point because, anyone who's voting for Biden isn't going to, views voting for third party as just voting for Trump at this point. So I think that's why, I personally think, if the LP really wanted to help Trump, they just take Chase out of the race, and that's my fault on that issue. With that being said, I hope they don't do that, but I guess we'll have to see what happens. Then we have why your groceries are still so expensive, record profits, record stock buybacks from Forbes.com by Clorox, and I said, because of government printing money, it's called inflation, look into it. The media narrative is corporate greed, but you have to ask yourself why corporations would only do sometimes inflation and never any time else. It's clearly due to all the money they printed during COVID, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have House Republicans unveil new bill to put former presidents above the law from AboveTheLaw.com by Clorox, and that's crosswords from the Libertarians subreddit, not the Libertarians subreddit, the Libertarians plural subreddit. And, I personally don't really care for that, but, they're only kind of doing it because of Trump. But that being said, I'm sure the Democrats would do the same thing if HRC or Obama or Biden or any of their elites ever got convicted, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Jeanette Rankin was the only member of the U.S. Congress to vote against joining both world wars. In a world full of Lindsey Grahams, be it Jeanette Rankin, I linked to her Wikipedia page, and that's the post that I made, and I said, the U.S. shouldn't have been, the U.S. should be out of all these foreign wars, and I really wish we could have some more anti-war people in government, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, what states do you think will flip in this year's post election? And I posted that and said, in 2020, Biden flipped 5 states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia, in addition to an electoral vote from Nebraska that Trump won in 2016. I would say that the states most likely for Biden is North Carolina. That the right take would be that he's going to take flip Texas and Florida as well. While I know I agree that it's happening in the long term, the Democrats seem to be trading their votes in the Rust Belt for votes in the Sun Belt. I don't think it's going to happen in this election. The state most likely for Trump, I would say, is Michigan, with Wisconsin close second, mainly thanks to Muslims in Dearborn as in response to Biden's Israel policy. Thoughts, and that's what I feel about that issue. I guess we'll have to wait and see what states flip though. Then we have an object lesson from COVID on how to destroy public trust by Lemon Limelight, and they say from Zinep Tefeki, sociologist and opinion comments writing in the New York Times, an object lesson from COVID on how to destroy public trust, emphasis added, and they share some of the article. And yeah, I definitely agree that COVID definitely decimated public trust in health institutions because they were untransparent about it and were very hell-bent on controlling the narrative. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Scoop. Mike Johnson seeks GOP voters for real to support Trump after guilty verdict from AxiosCom by Donald Key. And I said, Republican sneezes, average Redditor, fascism, The Handmaid's Tale, Project 2025, Christian nationalism, Trump, white supremacy, Russia. I think if HRC ever got convicted, the Dems would do the exact same shit. But, ultimately, since it's Orange Man bad on Reddit all the time, you're just going to see headlines like this constantly. Then we have CNR/bumper stickers by Brain Sauce, and that's crosswords from the bumper stickers subreddit. And it says, when the government boot is on your throat, it doesn't matter if it's the left one or the right one. And I agree with that very much. We have to stand against all kinds of authoritarianism, not just right-wing authoritarianism or left-wing authoritarianism. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And then we have, that's why we need to stop voting for the lesser evil. Remember, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Voting for either primary parties to prevent the error from taking over is not going to lead to change. From Ragnar OKXG. And it's a picture of a quote from another Reddit comment. This in your position is the rest of the thread is ready to take respectively. Yes, PSC never goes strictly franchised. It's like also saying it's harder, it's unfair, it's a cop-out. Standing in line for hours is what it takes, It's unfair that you're going to have to work harder to cast your vote, but that's just how it is right now. It sucks, but giving up because it's hard guarantees will never change. Saying what Bill Biden harms us too. It's also a cop-out. It's also who harms you less, not who you like. Be a grown-ass adult. And ultimately, I agree with their initial point in the post title about how we need to stop voting for this year, but sadly, I don't think that's ever going to change anytime soon. I think this country will collapse where the Republican and Democratic parties do, and that's my thoughts on that issue. And I think we're going to wrap up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.